Then Senator Klobuchar. Okay, then Senator Blumenthal.
Professor Stephen, you articulated about the predicate offenses for expanding RICO. How would these expanded tools equip law enforcement officers to target Russian criminals and other criminals, terrorists, and drug cartels for prosecution and depriving them of their ill-gotten gains?
Thank you, Senator. First of all, RICO designation has a cascade effect. Once you're designated under RICO, you're also picked up under Section 1956, the money laundering statute, and also Section 981, the civil forfeiture statute. So you are basically implicating a whole range of extra tools. Particularly with RICO, you get two things out of this. You get if you will, broader net or a clearer definition of complicity. It is, I think, more effective than the conspiracy statute in picking up fellow travelers, facilitators, if you will. And secondly, the sanctions are greater. You face a number of sanctions that you don't face under the primary offense. And money laundering has essentially the same effect.
The administration's legislative package has raised concerns by legal scholars like yourself. While you recognize the plan's obvious appeal, you've outlined in scholarship and in your opening statement some legal concerns that you have with the proposal. As you mentioned in your opening, there are litigation risks associated with the proposal. I'm also worried about the same. I don't want to do something that the court might just throw out. Would you please expand on these risks, including risks arising from the proposals trimming back some of the notice requirements that are implicated in the proposal?
Yes, sir. Essentially, three concerns. First of all, the retroactivity problem. Part of the administration's package is to make civil forfeiture, although not criminal penalties, applicable to newly enacted criminal sanctions retroactively. If you look at the Supreme Court precedent on retroactivity in civil penalties, I think you get a noisy signal. It's clear that retroactivity in civil sanctions is not per se unconstitutional, but the court seems to be saying that they do have concerns and there are circumstances. My concern is a very strong penalty, like a very strong sanction like civil forfeiture, coupled to a significant break with existing law, which I think the administration's proposed new criminal provision would be, might lead to a declaration of unconstitutional violation of due process retroactivity. The criminal proposal also proposes, as I read it, unless I misread it, universal jurisdiction over some offenses. That's to say, it doesn't matter who did it or where they did it, as long as they did it, U.S. asserts criminal jurisdiction over that. I'm not sure that's unconstitutional. There are academics out there and a few lower courts that suggest that universal jurisdiction, absent a few narrow areas, might be unconstitutional. I happen to disagree with that, and the restatement disagrees with that, but it's a risk out there that has to be taken care of. And then finally, the notice point that you raised. The problem I have with the legislation is it's simply not clear as to when the rules that we now use for notice, particularly under Federal Rule Civil Procedure Supplemental Rule 5, applies to these proceedings and when it's called off. And I would like greater clarity on that so that we, to the extent possible, go beyond notice to the general public to give specific notice to anyone whose assets are implicated, even though we reject the theory they have that their assets are implicated.
My last question, you've argued that Congress, quote, should craft a law that allows some assets to be confiscated without violating due process. How could Congress expand current law to allow our law enforcement agencies more robust powers without the risk of implementing fundamental constitutional protections? Are there specific problems that can be addressed across a number of different types of cases?
Yes, sir. I already mentioned what RICO designation will do. I would add to that, I didn't mention this in my statement, but it seems to be lifting the cap on administrative forfeiture is sound, and I also think extending the statute of limitations from 5 to 10 years makes a lot of sense as well.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. Thanks to Senator Durbin for holding this